Chris, good to have you back on. How are you?
I'm doing well. Excited to be back. I think this is my one, two, three, maybe third or fourth visit.
Yeah, you should get a coupon card each time.
I
Yeah,
really would love one.
I'll punch it in the post and send it back. For those who don't know who you are, do you mind giving a short intro to some of the stuff you've
No,
been working on?
absolutely. I'm kind of known before I met you. So I always consider myself like before Francesco and after Francesco. But before you, I was kind of known as the world's most connected person. So, and just about any country you can Google most connected and my name comes right up. And all that means is back almost 15 years ago, I created a lot of systems that automated information in my life and grabbed it off the internet and threw it in a Google Calendar. Kind of like time blocking, but for everything. And I kind of got kind of a D-list cult following for that, some magazine covers, a book deal, TV shows. But like the world before that, I was just an IT guy. I mean, I worked in I'm 53, so I worked in the 80s and 90s in like regular old IT shops as a help desk guy. And in the 2000s, you know how your career goes. I kind of got bigger and more successful as far as roles and responsibilities. But for the last decade, since I kind of became a D-listed celebrity, I mean, now I'm so fortunate I get to speak all over the world. Well, used to. I'm starting to again, and I get to consult. So you know, everyone from Bayer, the Wonder Drug people, to Microsoft, pay me to come in and kind of look at massive scale. Coca-Cola brought me in to look at the massive scale problem they were having with data around soda machines. And I've got a little side business where I have an app that I built called Our Balance, and it's just fun stuff.
Yeah, we'll be. I'm still checking it out for the review, but I'm enjoying the way that it connects to the sort of like the Apple Health and also like what you're doing to sort of give you a score. I think it's really cool. Yeah, good work with that.
Yeah.
And we're going to chat today a little bit about something you've already chatted with Marie about, neurodiversity, and I still fully don't understand what it means, but obviously I understood the conversation more than I understood the title of it. But for those who are maybe like, and even for myself, who are a bit maybe new to this word and new to this concept of emotions and tools, maybe you could give like a short overview.
Sure. So neurodiversity, I mean, it's super, it's one of those words that's fun to Google. I think more and more people, because it's like, and more people, I'm seeing it used more and more in Twitter bios. I'm seeing it talked about more and more. But to unpack it a little bit, you almost have to think about the opposite of neurodiversity, which is neurotypical. And neuro just meaning brain, typical just meaning regular. I don't want to say normal because that's all full of all sorts of contradictions and scary feelings. But in life, you know, we're all born with a brain, and that brain's connected to a spinal cord, and that spinal cord's connected to some senses. And, you know, depending on how you were born, where you're born, the conditions, you know, everything from, you know, maybe something genetic to some type of childhood trauma, our brains develop differently. Are we on the same page so far?
Yeah, all good.
All right. So as our brains develop and change, they have kind of responses to the world. I like to say traits, or it's kind of the way I like to think about these things. These responses can be all sorts of things. You can have, you know, one of the things people talk about is like time blindness or rejection sensitivity. Time blindness is where you like just lose track of time. How people normally talk about neurodiversity is when they label themselves with a diagnosis, like that's just my ADHD, or someone who might be organized in a very effective, highly ordered way. You know, it's like, oh, that person's OCD. Yeah. But what we're seeing now is this movement to kind of unpathologize, so remove the sickness from the labels that we've given people, and say, how is your brain functioning?
Yeah.
And what are you doing with your brain to make it easier for you? You know, so often neurodiverse people have to mask, so they have to pretend to have, you know, emotions and sensitivities that just don't feel natural to them. You know, and you'll see this from the rise of, you know, self-love culture to the rise of imposter syndrome culture to, you know, if you go back 10 years ago, a lot of Brene Brown stuff on shame, you'll see all of these things masking. But what they're all masking, and why I think I'm so passionate about neurodiversity, is we all underneath our skin and underneath our privilege and underneath all the things that make us so uniquely us, we have really diverse and unique brains. And maybe we should be looking at that and addressing those problems.
Yeah, it's I think there's like it's that like internal stigma, isn't it, of like what everyone else thinks about you. Is sort of like the judgment of people in our space as well. But I think that's a good place to start, because like I definitely find myself like whenever a tool's being mentioned or anything like that, I obviously do lots of the tool reviews, but I know a lot of people in the community who thrive with tools. And there's that, I was talking to you before, there's like that balance. It's like, when is too much enough and when is too little enough? Because I always see like there's two types of people in my life, at least, is like, I always think like my wife, who doesn't need any productivity tools. And she's completely organized and fine. And then there's people like me and maybe the community who have tools, run off like 5 or 6 of them, and function really well. So I always find there's like some sort of judgment in between of like, what is the right amount? Like, do you think that's a problem that we're facing right now? And do you think that's like, does that lapse into the like neurodiversity issue?
I've been really vocal on the few videos I've done with you. I've actually had a lot of feedback of the video I did with you and Mike. And then you were nice enough to let me on to kind of do just a slow down version of that. So I don't want to say it's a problem, because I think maybe sometimes I can come off a little bit Debbie Downer about productivity. What I'm trying to say when I talk about productivity through this lens of it can be almost cultish with people is I've found that what a lot of people are doing is they're having feelings or emotions or reactions to things that they're not familiar with, and tools blunt or diffuse those things.
Yeah.
So, if you think about, a Notion person versus an Airtable person versus an Obsidian person, right? You go right down the Freud, the Freud rabbit hole with this one. They're very, very separate people. You know what I mean? And some people will use a little bit of one, a little bit of another. But at the end of the day, what you're really seeing is people thinking.
Yeah, you are.
So if we start to identify tools with the ways you think, knowing your thinking is going to change, I think we're going to be a little bit further along. And I just always really struggled with, how many people have underlying anxiety and depression and kind of mask it through productivity.
Yeah. I guess it's like, but I guess it happens two ways, doesn't it? It's like some people have initially that anxiety and depression and potentially can place a tool and feel like they fix it because they've actually got one aspect of their life under control. But also it's the other way around as well. Do you think that, go on, sorry.
No, I was just going to share just a little bit of my story, but I want to
go
too dark. But like, I was raised in a really relaxed family for all intent and purposes. Like oh my gosh, you've got the dream family. In the 70s and 80s, like also a wonderful time to raise. But I also had a father who was very violent and very physically violent, but just with me, not with my brother, not with my mother or anything like that. By the time I was 9 or 10 or 11, I had my first computer and I was in there organizing everything. I mean, I could have been on Keep Productive in 1979. I mean, that's just like who I was. And I remember when I finally got to be late teen and I was, had my first panic attack at 16, like in the hospital, like full on panic attack. At 18, I was pretty sure I was, having some really dark thoughts and ended up, in a treatment center for 2-week inpatient. And then came out diagnosed obsessive compulsive, Puro. I don't want to get into a lot of labels, but ultimately, if I erased as much of that as I could and just went back to just me, I was always super sensitive to light, super sensitive to food textures, fabrics, patterns, certain things. I was one of those kids who could just focus on something like relentlessly, hyper focus. Again, without the trauma, I probably would have ended up, you know, on some spectrum somewhere anyway. And I
Yeah.
think what's really important is tools gave me a way and still give me a way today to work with my brain in the same way
Mm.
meditation works for other people. And I meditate too. But I'll
Yeah.
tell you,
Yeah.
like, it's an amazing feeling just to be with your tools. And so many
Yeah.
people have so much shame about, you know, they'll spend 5 hours reorganizing a list. And I'm
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
well, maybe you're just working with your feelings, and maybe that's 5 great hours.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's that argument whether sort of pruning your own system is a way of actually just calming down. Because yeah, we've seen it with like Notion, we've seen it with Bujo's over the years, and even like the old methodologies as well. Is there like would you say there's would you say that this is something that there's a limit to? So for example, like because I always say to people in like if, for example, in the Notion course, I say like, okay, it's good to have a nice base, but at the same time there's a limit to making too much modifications and changes ongoing. But then am I part of the problem? Am I
Well, you
part of
know,
the judging side of it in a
yeah,
way?
I think the fact you want to offer someone a perspective means you're not. I mean, you're giving someone an alternative. I think we have to be real careful with just shame in general because I, like a lot of people, I'm a shame magnet. So if I even sense it in the air, it's like one of those cartoon characters that smells food, they kind of float. You know, I'll float towards shame around
Yeah.
anything. So I do think we need to be careful about that. But I think the most important thing people need to take away from this talk right now is it's okay to have all your feelings and express them any way you want with your tools. I mean, I might be the worst use case to ask about, can you be too extreme with productivity? Uh,
Yeah.
because, you know, I had someone literally say to me the other day, and I said, I'm going to remember this from my talk with Francesco. They said, Chris, you've weaponized productivity.
Yeah, that's a good. Yeah, you have. Yeah.
And, you know, and I understand where it can be scary, but, you know, at what point do I decide like my life isn't important for me to pay that level of attention to? You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
if I'm not paying attention to my kid, then yeah, I've gone too far. Not paying attention to my spouse, I'm gone that far. But I mean, I think I've shared with you, I've integrated my tools not to just myself, but my spouse, my doctor, my lawyer. I mean,
Yeah.
everyone kind of has a role in it, but I mean, I can't get anyone to pick up the phone. So, you know, what else am I
Yeah.
going to do? If I have to build you a portal so you'll talk to me, that's what's going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. It's that conversation of like you feel like I'm guessing once you've got all this set up, like you feel yourself, you feel like the closest version to you because because you feel comfortable with all of this around you, don't you?
Well, that, and if you go back to our first video, whatever, how many ever years ago now, I was very deliberate about thinking, you know, at whatever I was at the time, late 40s, if I'm going to build a system that's going to manage my life, I need to know what I value, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was just a game changer for me. The problem with today is everybody treats everything with equal value.
Yeah.
Everything is infinite scroll shopping, infinite scroll friendships, infinite scroll work, infinite scroll relationship. That's not how
Yeah.
life works.
Mm.
And I think until we can break people out of relationships and money and something, they can't be paused and restarted. It has
Yeah.
to be one of these ongoing relationships. So, you know, I was very deliberate and I loved our first chat together, but I tell people all the time, if you can't tell me the 2 or 3 things that are keeping you going, like name them and tell me what you're doing
Yeah.
to keep them safe, put down all your tools.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's more to do with the mapping of the tools around those important things. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's something that when you sent, I think when we did the third chat, when you did the extension of the Mike Vardy conversation, I think I did do a little bit of like sort of values at a workshop, because I was like, yeah, like at the end of the day, it's like, so you never actually write down your values. You never actually go like, oh right, what's actually driving me forward, because you just assume that it's not. But actually pausing and thinking is quite a good way to do it.
One of the most common requests I get from your videos is, can you share your values with me? Not my
Mm.
system. my values. And, I can show you the screen again. And what I find so remarkable about that is how people have really come to terms with, it isn't the interlinking of how all these tools work together. It's the fact that I took time to sit down with my family and said, these are the things that are important to us, right?
Yeah.
So there isn't any task, there isn't a dollar spent, there isn't a meeting scheduled, there isn't a business that I do work with, there isn't a person I know that doesn't have a value associated with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think if you could see your time, talk about my balance, our balance, my time is one thing. Like I only have so many hours in a day, but the decisions I make, the filter I use beyond that is from my values. Right? Everyone wants time management, but that's only going to get you so far. You still have to have decision filtering.
Yeah. Yeah. Because else you just do everything versus
Infinite
doing
scroll.
the right things.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's probably one thing that, like, the last couple of months, I think when we had Otto, my boy, it's like before I was just doing everything for everything's sake, and now I'm like doing everything filtered down like 100 times, and I'm definitely a lot more productive for it. But it goes back to the values thing. It's like, right, my time is less now, but that's good because I'm spending it in the right places. So
yeah. And I think the neurodiversity becomes kind of an extension of like, okay, so if we all have the same amount of time and we all use our values to kind of filter, you're still left with what brain are you working with? And I think that's where like there are certain tools and certain ways of working that make it really good for people. I'm someone who I live in Miro and I live in Airtable. I live in Miro because, I'll just zoom out and show you a Miro board for a second. I live in Miro because I need to be able to see everything at once, right? All of it at once. But I also need to be able to come in when I have everything visible and go, okay, this is everything, but what about this one thing? And then zoom into this just one thing. And like, it doesn't really matter what part of my life is. I have an associated Miro board tied to it. So whether it be my clients, who I just got back from Vegas and I'm filming this whole thing for them. And this is a board they have right down so they can see. I know they have copies of the emails, but they need to see them the way I see them.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
And when you give people a kind of a roadmap to kind of understand who you are and how you think, let me say that again. When you give people a roadmap of who you are and how you think, everybody wins.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, there's no race to be smart. We all can look up anything. There's a race to explain yourself.
Yeah, because there's so many of us, and it's like when you come across someone, you want to know who they are truly. The obviously the pandemic was quite like a big thing in the last year, but I think it's changed a lot of the way that it's had good effects and bad effects on the way that people are doing. How do you think it's changed the sort of neurodiversity and tool market? Do you think it's become more like people become more aware, or have they because they've spent so much time on technology, have they put more time and attention into their families or not? I don't know whether you've been kind of keeping an eye on stuff.
I mean, I wrote a book back in 2018 called Don't Unplug, How Technology Saved My Life and Can Save Yours Too. I've always been kind of one of these people who's very leery of anyone telling you to unplug. First, I just don't think it's realistic in the 2010s, much less the 2020s. And ultimately, I think what we saw happen with the pandemic had a profound effect. And something that I was worried would happen, and that was what happens if we ever enter a world where we only have tools.
Yeah.
And we spent a decade telling people they were monsters because they couldn't eat dinner without their phone.
Yeah.
It happened, right? Kids couldn't get off their devices because they need them for school. I think the pandemic in so many ways did two things. It solidified what's important for each and every one of us. The other thing I think it did was it taught people that when you've got nothing left to use to love with, a phone will be just fine. If you have to say goodbye to your mom who got COVID over FaceTime, you'll be happy you have the phone. If you have to use your phone to get notifications that you might have been exposed to be COVID, you'll be happy to have your phone. right?
Yeah. Yeah.
The problem is we spent so much time judging each other and what we might be doing that we never thought about what we should be doing. And
Yeah.
that's thinking about ourselves and just like talking about it. My publisher told me, and I love this line my publisher told me once. She said, Chris, nobody cares what you know, they care how you think about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it changed the way I wrote, it changed the way I design, it changed the way I consult, everything. It even changes, like, the first time I met you, I'd never seen you other than YouTube. And the first thing I did was started telling you how much I cared for you and how much I appreciate what you do and how I noticed like things you do. That's important for me.
Yeah. 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 I think that was, it was, for me, like, I don't think I'd had anybody else who did that before in my life. Like, actually just sort of like went, quite raw. Do you know what I mean? Which is nice. It's like, it's a quality you don't see anymore because like, everything is sort of like edited and filtered down. So it's hard.
Imagine a world where people asked each other, is there anything I could have done better, instead of, would you like to take a survey at the end of this call? Imagine a world where like you took time to record everything instead of being told that everything's being recorded.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm talking about, people get really upset about kind of a lot of my messaging, but it's really about autonomy, right?
Yeah.
And I just think now you take the neurodiverse community and you take this cybernetic kind of exoskeleton we all have, whether it be the tools we use or the types of headsets that mute out sound, right?
Yeah.
Also can something like Endel, which can pump in different circadian rhythm sound. We're a really superior group of people, right? Who really haven't been told, like, this is your brain, this is your cybernetic senses, and this is how those two things work together. Yeah. And it's okay if you're sometimes confused. You've got one machine telling you one thing and one heart telling you something else. I mean, so many people build second brains when they should have first hearts.
Yeah.
And we don't really ever go down the right. Well, what does that look like? What does a Tin Man heart look like? To use a Wizard of Oz reference.
Yeah. Yeah, that could be a good course actually.
Right?
The first article. No, I think one of my final questions was actually about tools, but I think I want to ask you more about, like, I think I'm sort of have a few thoughts on like what the future of the productivity app market will look like, and they might be similar to yours, but I think it's obviously going to be more led where we remove ourselves from doing a lot of the manual work, and it's everything. It's almost like Iron Man, isn't it? I mean, it's pretty much like your life anyway now. But it's going to be like how well we communicate with those apps to do the job. How do you see the future of productivity apps? And like, do you think that people will ever move away from that sort of manual management aspect of productivity?
I mean, I love the question because I'm doing a big event with Microsoft and one of their CTOs in September, and I just got a preview of like some of the Microsoft stuff that's going on. My mind was just like blown. But I'll talk about that in a second. They'll always be manual. I mean, people still shoe horses.
I do, yeah.
Right. So, we're always going to have that. I just think it comes down to, we still haven't had the tough conversations around what does autonomy look like this decade. I mean, so many people will take the first suggestion that's, their email will say, do you mean to say this? So many people will take the first suggestion as, do you want to listen to this now? So many people, when putting in a GPS address, will take whatever the first suggestion is. Before you kind of judge me and how much technology I use, you probably should say, how much default settings are you on? Because I think that's kind of the future. Because if we think about the future of productivity, we have to say, well, people will want more things automated. I mean, I can tell you how many people like come to me, like, do you think you could automate this process between Notion and Airtable and using Zapier and then Integromat? And like, why? So I don't have to think about it. Okay, if you don't want to think, there are other things you can do, right?
Yeah.
But productivity, I mean, stuff Microsoft's on and Google's working on. I'd like to say it's all very big mother, not big brother. Just kind of take a break. Microsoft's partnering with Headspace now. You get a daily email that kind of gives you like a turn-by-turn directions to your day. I love it. It's all really wonderful. I just wonder if someday we'll look back and go, hey, do you remember that most connected guy who like said he wanted like a hand in these decisions? Maybe we should have tried that.
Yeah.
Because I think having your day dictated to you, no matter how wonderful it is going to really suck.
Yeah, I guess it's sort of like hand holding, isn't it, to some extent? But it for some people it's going to probably be perfect, but for other people it's going to be like a tricky sort of thing to get used to. But that's where third parties will come in and just feel like they can take the space, which is
I
good.
built something during the pandemic called the Habit Store. I can show you a preview real quick. And the Habit Store, the reason I did it was I kind of wanted to think about the future of productivity, but through the lens that I see it. And for me, like what I thought about the Habit Store was, well, if the future had a productivity slant, it wouldn't look like a tool. It would look like a habit. So I don't want to take a class from Tiago. I want to be Tiago. So I just want to download everything he does. You know what I'm saying? I sometimes joke around and say, there are two types of people in the world: people who want to be you, and people who want to be with you.
Yeah.
Right. So the Habit Store was really cool because what I did was I used kind of a lot of the tools I love to use. But what I did was I allowed people to kind of put it under this idea of like, show me just stuff around productivity. Like maybe I'm just worried about productivity right now, or show me stuff just around health. And then people will be able to see how I look at my stuff. But what I really loved about it was I could say, hey, today I'm feeling anxious, regardless of what it's for. Show me what I can use if I'm feeling anxious.
Yeah.
And I think the future productivity is going to look a lot like that. I think the future productivity is going to be, how are you feeling? And here's the UI for those feelings. We're already seeing it with dark mode. Right?
Yeah.
We're already seeing it with tools that kind of Audible has like a driving interface, so you have less options. We're already seeing tools adopt and adapt to our mood. We just aren't seeing anyone admit to it yet.
Yeah. It's going to be it's one of these things that it's going to be gradual, but then it will just take over, and we'll be like, oh, what? I've got a new skin here going on. It is definitely exciting.
I mean, can you imagine if your inbox just reordered by your mood?
Yeah. Like based on how much energy you had or how you're feeling.
I'll take that automation.
Yeah.
I'll take that one.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
right?
Like you'd get more done.
Exactly. Or my email kind of reorganized itself by the weather. Like maybe I should be outside right now, so it's going to be the crappiest email first.
I
mean, there's so many wonderful things we could do with this if we were to tap into like our brain isn't this horrible thing we need to create, a second or third version of. We can deal with the first one.
Yeah.
And to me, I'm just like, I really wish people would, just think about that. It's like, I don't know, people are so remarkable just on their own, and then just be all that remarkableness, and then use the tools to make that better instead of like saying, is there something wrong with me that the tool can fix? How about you're fine, and the tool's only going to make you more fine?
Yeah, that's true.
Like if Kim Kardashian had a productivity, side to her.
Yeah, only if. It's. I think it's definitely going to be an interesting future for sure. Do you think that, like, just as a bonus question, do you think there's like I think we've talked a lot about Endo recently, but because I'm quite I like how like science based it is, but do you think there's going to be like an app in the productivity space out of the ones that are out there that does make a first move with like that sort of technology? Do you have a feeling around any of them?
I mean, to me, like the two biggest ones in the space right now, because I encompass productivity, kind of health, value, nature, and transcendence all as one big like life suite. Obviously Muse, the headband, was kind of the first one to really focus on an external thing. Watches now, which are considered super, productivity hacking, all have like a mindfulness component. But as far as like actual tools, the good news is almost every single tool now, if it's running on a modern operating system, is using some alignments to circadian rhythm, because almost all phones now automatically change the background. I'm not talking about dark mode and light mode. I'm just saying they change the hue of the screen. As far as actually making a severe play, like I'm organizing your inbox because this part of the day your circadian rhythm should be here. I mean, I've talked to some of the Endel folks. They're doing and planning some really interesting things that, imagine if the whole house worked that way, kind of like my house. Right? My house literally does respond to me in the weather. But I think that's a huge step forward, because again, I'm not anti-technology. I'm anti shaming technology. And I think in the future, if we go out, and I've been saying this since the late 2010s, there are no phones in the future.
Yeah.
There are no phones in people's hands by 2030. And the
Yeah.
people who have phones are literally have them, and it's like the worst section of society. Most people today are walking around with something on their wrist and something in their ear full time.
Yeah. Yeah.
The computers are all around us. And I think we need to really get our story straight in the next 8 years as these things start to fade away and meld into us. You know, the rise of the mindful cyborg.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. I think eventually that'll probably be like, we'll look at it as the PDA sort of situation. The PDA, is it PDA? Yeah, I just sort of caught that generation.
I was wondering if you have one. Yeah, like they had so many. There was like Windows CE. That was the the stylus, and you can import your calendar. It was like the most amazing thing ever. I remember my doctor used to say, this is like way back, doctor's like, what are you doing? Like, here's a card. I'm like, I'm putting it on my calendar. You've got a card. And now they're just like, we'll text you. And it's like, oh my gosh, what happened? You know, I went from you hating me for picking up a device to now you won't look at me because I should have.
Yeah, I think my dad had a Palm Pilot like just for a couple of years, but I fell in love with just watching the music, but that's probably where it all went wrong.
Well, I mean, the thing with PDAs, and I think, you know, again, the neurodiversity and just people, is like, how often do people just stare at their time? Like calendars and emails are, you know, emails are who you love and care about, or who you should love and care about, and calendars are how you value your time. The two most fundamental things we treat as work. I'm just saying, no. Treat them as fundamental. Just keep the wrong people out of your calendar and your email. You'll be fine.
Yeah. yeah. Very personalized life. Chris, that was epic. We always have great chats. We'll have to do a fifth one for sure. But thank you for coming on. And is there any place that you want to push people to at the end of this video?
I don't know. I'm all over Twitter, but it won't make sense to a lot of people. But you can check out my website, chrisdancy.com. There's really nothing there for you. I have a tool called Our Balance, helps you kind of manage your time. But like I said, I think at the end of every single talk I've had with you, if anyone's watching this and you made it this far and you feel inspired or scared or worried or happy or for any reason, my phone number is literally on my website. People will tell you I pick up my phone all the time. You are not alone. There are people who want to understand you and care about you. And if you feel kind of alienated, you're just around the wrong people. And I'm always here to remind you that good people exist and we'll take care of you.
Yeah, it's lovely. I need to just give you a random call one day and just be like,
people do all the time. It's crazy. I mean, it's so much fun. Sometimes I let my spouse answer, and that's even funnier. It's like, is this Chris? And this is his husband. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
But no, I miss the phone. You know, it's so hard nowadays. Everybody treats everybody like a DVR. I'm going to pause you and I'll catch up on you later. And it's like, gosh, I don't have episodes to binge. I'm sitting here like hurting.
Yeah.
You know, pain operators are standing by. Dial that number.
There was did you ever remember there was like an app? I must have been like 5 or 6 years ago that it was like, I don't know, it was called like Wake Up or something like that, where you would set your alarm time you want to wake up, and it was like a community thing. Do you remember?
And a random stranger would call you.
Yeah. It was that was the funniest app ever. Just because it was like, it would be brilliant because like, but I don't know where it went. Do you know where it went? Is it still going?
You know, the problem with a lot of these great apps, I mean, there's one of my favorite GPSs actually would it would monitor how you go places and take you ways you hadn't been.
Oh, that's.
I mean, there's a whole, you know, I would call it just like super kind apps that have all kind of gone away. The problem is a lot of these people just don't, it costs a couple $100 a month to keep the server going, and it's at some point you just get tired of it. One of my favorite people is Ben Grosser on Twitter, and Ben's created tools that filter Facebook and Twitter so that you don't see vanity metrics. You can't see likes or dates, and that's a wonderful tool. So. Yeah, I love that tool, but so many of the really kind of things that made tech magical kind of don't exist anymore because there's no utility in understanding yourself. I mean, tool makers are so much easier off if they can make us all the same because they don't have to do such unique features.
Yeah, very true. Yeah. I did like it. I did like that sort of era. But yeah, thanks so much, Chris, for your time. Let's carry on chatting, but to all those who watch, thank you very much for popping along, and we'll have Chris back on soon. So thank you very much.